And that's a memo. Now, for the top story tonight, let's bring in Senator John McCain for his take on Iran and Afghanistan. The senator joins us from Washington. We're pleased to have you, Senator, because you could be president of the United States right now. You could be facing exactly what President Obama is facing. So let's take Iran first. Am I making any mistakes in my analysis, sir?
No, not at all. And this is a very serious situation. And the solution, I think, not only lies with an attempt to impose sanctions on Iran. As you, I think, appropriately and accurately pointed out, I have very serious doubts as to whether Russia and China will cooperate with the sanctions that have significant effect on Iran, and we can talk about why. But I think you left out something, and that is our advocacy for regime change in Iran, and I don't mean through military action, by helping, supporting, assisting in a variety of ways, including internet access and other encouragement of elements within Iran to overthrow the regime.
Well, we got to assume that's happening, though. We have to assume that the intelligence services of the United States are doing everything they can, but you're in a race against time now. I mean, if you don't get the sanctions to strangle the gasoline flow, because that's all, that could bring it to a halt. That brings Iran down. If you don't get them, then Israel's going to do something. Israel's just not going to sit there and do nothing. They're going to do something. So we're talking months here. And, it's those Revolutionary Guard, they're pretty tough guys. It's going to be pretty tough to overthrow that government with them standing between them and the mullahs, between the good people in Iran and the mullahs. So you got to assume that President Obama has to have a plan B. Sanctions don't work. Israel's coming. What does President Obama do? What would you do?
Well, first of all, again, I would have from the beginning, and you disagreed with me at the time. I'd have said these people that are rising up against this oppression and brutality, they have our full support. And the day that that young woman named Netta bled to death before hundreds of millions of people all over the world, that was the beginning of the end of that regime. And that would have removed many of the problems that we have. And
but what would you have done, though?
Things we can do besides just the intelligence agencies' activities.
Give me one big thing that John McCain... I got it. Give me one big thing that John McCain would have done during that turmoil.
Well, first of all, I would have said, you're right, we're with you. We are, and the world is behind you. We have respect and appreciation for human rights, and I wouldn't, and I would have done everything I could to assist them outside of, obviously, military action. But, and again, your point, though, is what the situation we're in. There's no good options, Bill. We can't take military option off the table, yet you know the ramifications. I think you just described it very accurately in your talking points. So I think we have to try the sanctions, but at the talking that's going to take place on the 1st of October, I'm not optimistic, obviously, as you mentioned, the missile testing that's taken place in the last few days. But I also think we have to sit down and talk Turkey to the Russians and the Chinese and try to make them understand that if there is conflict in the Middle East, it's not in Russia or China's national security interests either in the long run.
But again, you got to assume
on that.
You got to assume that Hillary Clinton's been doing that and the regime is doing it. All right, look. You're a Navy guy. I call for a possible blockade of Iran if everything collapses. I think that would stop Israel from doing anything. Put some warships in there and say, enough's enough. We're blockading you. We did it with Cuba back in the Kennedy regime. Would you support that?
I think that is an option that must be seriously considered, and I think it would have a serious effect. I would remind you that Hezbollah in southern Lebanon has thousands of rockets that they could unleash on Israel.
No, I know.
It's hard to tell. If the Iranians block the Straits of Hormuz, it cuts off the world's oil supply as well. So we got to think it through. But it's an option, frankly, that again, I certainly wouldn't take it off the table.
Okay. Now let's go to Afghanistan now. A deteriorating situation, according to General McChrystal. You just heard the general say he doesn't talk to President Obama. I thought that was a little strange. Now, the Pentagon and Gates say, look, that's the way we want it. What do you think?
I think it's vitally important that every president that I know of has talked directly to the generals. Of course, you observe the chain of command, but here's the person who has the direct responsibility, General McChrystal in this case, of some 60-some thousand young Americans. I just out of idle curiosity, I would have talked to him.
I was taken aback
seriously.
by that. Now, you would put the 40,000 in, right? You put the 40,000 in?
If we don't, then we are facing disaster, as General McChrystal has adequately described, and we can't do half measures. Time is not on our side, as Admiral Mullen, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, testified, and we need to act very soon. And I understand the president's dilemma, and I sympathize with the fact that it's the left base of his party and a lot of other factors politically and otherwise that he has to consider, but I would absolutely agree with that. And those who are opposing it are the same people that said the surge wouldn't work.
Yeah, the surge wouldn't work.
I know that.
I got that. All right, I'm going to hold the senator over for another couple of minutes, and we'll back time it all down in the show so that you all know. All right, now look, here's my problem with Afghanistan. You got a corrupt government in there. Karzai is ineffective. We've had 8 years in there, Senator. We haven't been able to train their army or their police force at all. 8 years. Okay? So Americans on both sides of the aisle, liberal, conservative, independent, libertarian, whatever, they're going, maybe it's impossible. You've been there. I've been there. It's a primitive country. Life expectancy is 40. Most people don't have electricity. Most people are illiterate. All right? We're trying to nation build in there. It looks like it's impossible. So to me, it looks like we're going to have a staunch police action, and that's about the best we can do. But maybe you have another plan.
I have the same plan that we used in Iraq, only adapted to the different demographics, geography, etc. You provide security for the people, and then the social and economic process move forward. We had a government in Iraq when we started the surge that had no control over the country. It was riven by terrible sectarian violence. I have great faith in General Petraeus and General McChrystal, who tell me we can do it, but first you have to provide security for the people. Exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
I think most Americans give that a try, but if it doesn't work, what are you going to do?
They're very weary, Bill.
Yeah.
They're very weary.
Absolutely.
And you know they are.
Right.
But we have, I think, really only two choices. You do the right thing, or you get out and...
Well, you got to give it a try. It's just like in Iraq, and you were right on Iraq, and most others were wrong. The senator was right on Iraq, on the surge. We got to give it one more try, one more good try, and see how it comes down. And I also want to say, and I know you've said this before, that the American military is performing magnificently once again. Once again, not only do they perform magnificently in Iraq, but this is harder. This is harder. They're in a primitive country with people who have no idea about decorum or anything like that, and the American military is performing. Can't even use air power now in a lot of situations. But it's just stunning to me how good our military is. I'll give you the last word, Senator.
I agree with everything you said in spades. I'd also point out the Afghans are good fighters too, and they love a good fight. Yeah. And so we've got to
get them mobilized. Then it's been 8 years.
Train them up.
Yeah,
train them
8
up.
years.
You got to operate with them. You got to operate with them. I thank you for having me on, Bill.
Senator, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for coming on. Next on the rundown, 22 Democratic.